Unbelievable. Oh my God. That's the worst thing I have ever heard about my family.
My initial reaction was to delete it and not say anything.
Well, I get emotional about it. Sorry. I can't imagine what she went through.
That's the real-life aftermath of at-home DNA testing. Something once reserved for crime scene investigators and scientists curing illnesses has been tossed directly into consumers' hands. The DNA industry lures us in with the deep curiosity we humans have about ourselves.
You always wonder, who does make you who you are?
So tens of millions of us have swabbed a cheek or spit into a tube, and the ads show people overjoyed when the results come in.
All my life, this is what I wanted to know. This is just incredible.
It's really amazing. Something that just happens in the movies, I guess.
This podcast is not about those people. These are the true life stories of the skyrocketing number of us whose DNA results have turned our own genes into mysteries. In my family alone, 3 shocking results have rewritten our lives in ways we never saw coming, adding and subtracting to the people we call family. Our first episode is about a woman named Aina Zellers, whose earth-shaking DNA result makes sense of her lifetime of disconnect.
The whole who am I is coming in. Who am I? That's where some aha moments came, because then I finally saw someone that I did look like, because I never looked like anybody in my family. It's so painful.
A DNA result that gives a whole new meaning to the girl next door. That's coming up on Suddenly Family. If you're listening to this podcast, that means you appreciate investigative storytelling. What if you had the chance to investigate and share important stories? Whether you want to dive into a new career in journalism or start your own investigative podcast, the Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University offers a variety of graduate programs just for you. My first step was visiting cronkite.asu.edu, where you can explore the master's degrees in investigative journalism, mass communication, and sports journalism. Now, back to Suddenly Family. Aina, you grew up in Maryland, and I'd just like you to paint a picture of what things were like in your childhood. Would you describe it as a happy home?
I think there were moments where there were things that were not necessarily unhappy, but no, I can't describe it as a happy home. I don't think my parents were a happy union. I think they did the best that they could, maybe.
Were you closer to your mother or to your father?
I'd probably have to say my dad, because at least I felt like there was something about my dad that was soft and sweet. And he had a kindness. And my mother, she wasn't someone that I was ever easily close to. I wanted to be close to my mother, but I can't say I really felt a huge embrace by either of my parents.
So, did you ever feel at home with your own family?
No, not at all. I never fit in. I never felt like I fit with my own family. And I was so clearly different than my older brother and sister. I didn't look like them. I was always the sore thumb. It's like, why does she look different? There was a lot of that chatter growing up. But I always felt like the adults and other people, and I know it sounds paranoid, I always felt like something's wrong with me. When I would walk in a room, the voices would suddenly go hushed. The conversation would stop or become very low. And I just felt a lot of eyes upon me, and I could never figure it out. And as a child, I just felt like it was me. I'm like, there's something wrong with me.
Aina isn't the only one who feels this way. Her cousin Beth also recalls some strange incidents, one of them involving Aina's dad, Charles, and his brothers.
Her father, who I call Uncle Charles, came to our house, and the 3 of the brothers were standing in our yard, and my younger sister and I ran out and, "Hi, Uncle Charles," and we were told to go. And there was a lot of upset at that time. Something happened at that time that, what's going on?
So with all the distress at her home, Aina takes refuge right across the way at her best friend Joanne's house.
My safe place was her house. My safe person was her. And people who just saw us together, I mean, they always would put us together as sisters. Even another safe person was her mother, Velma, Henry's wife. She was always so nice to me. I would go over to their house. I'd spend the nights over there. They were always going either to Virginia or to the beach, and I would get invited along. And I always thought, oh, this is great. My family doesn't take these trips. I mean, we didn't have the money to do that, but they would take me on their trips with them. And I always would be like, oh my God, that's so nice. They're just so nice to me.
Over the years, Aina remains close to Joanne. Even when she moves away from Maryland, she stays in touch with her childhood best friend. Aina and Joanne call, visit each other, and always pick right back up where they left off. Aina often thinks back on the times she spent over at Joanne's house, and something that always stands out to her, how kind Joanne's mom was to her. Sweet memories that become incredibly confusing after Aina takes a DNA test. Podcasts shed light on stories that otherwise may not be told. What if you could be that voice for someone? Well, you can. The Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University allows you to do just that. Become an investigative journalist, a strategic communicator in the media field, or a thought leader in the world of sports. Do what I did. Visit cronkite.asu.edu to learn more about their graduate degrees. Who will you become at the Cronkite School? Now, back to Suddenly Family. Throughout her childhood, Aina Zellers always senses something's not quite right at home. Something palpable she can never quite put her finger on. At the first opportunity as an adult, Aina moves away from Maryland, though she can never shake off how her mother mistreated her. Decades later, Aina's nephew brings up a terrible reminder of what she endured at the hands of her mom, her aunts, and even her grandmother.
He said, I have a question for you. There was this wash of negativity from all of them towards you. He said, what was that about? He wanted to know what that negativity was that was coming off of these women toward me. And he said, because he could never understand it. He said, because I was always nice to them and I was nice to him. He said he just couldn't understand it because he perceived me as a nice person. He said, why would these women who otherwise, without me in the room, would behave accordingly and then suddenly start behaving differently when I entered the room?
Her nephew's words really get to Aina. Here's something she's felt deep inside her entire life, but to hear it from someone else truly rattles her, and it leads her to question her whole sense of self. So she decides to order a DNA test from 23andMe. And at first, nothing really jumps out at her when she gets the results.
It didn't seem conclusive in any way, shape, or form because I'm like, well, I don't have any people on here that I recognize. But I started clicking around on all the links, and it took me a little while to understand what I was looking at. Well, then I finally found, after a day or so, the one that had the family names. And then when I clicked the link on the family names, I didn't see any of my maiden name in there. And it's like, okay, this is a total mismatch. This is not correct information. And so I clicked on the family names. And that's where I saw the last name of the family across the street, which is Smart. So Smart. And they were our neighbors. It's a knife to the gut.
Smart, Joanne Smart, Aina's best friend, the girl from across the street. DNA results match you to people you're related to who've taken the same DNA test. And Aina starts seeing matches to her mom's side of the family, though no link to her dad's side of the family. But the last name of the neighbor, Smart, S-M-A-R-T, keeps showing up. And suddenly, a flood of memories come back to Aina about her mom and Joanne's father, Henry.
I remember him visiting our home quite often. Dad would leave for work. He worked shift work. As soon as Dad was gone, next thing you know, my mother is maybe taking a bath, putting on a negligee, and then there's a knock at the door, and it's the neighbor, it's Henry, and we're shuffled off to bed. And this went on for years. And so that was my normal. And we didn't really talk about it. It wasn't like a discussion that ever came up or even thought about.
Even Aina's cousin, Beth, remembers clues about the man from across the street.
I remember Henry Smart's truck always being up the road, and we just thought he was like crazy walking through the woods, when in fact he was in the house. He would leave his house, turn left, go around the block, and park his truck up in the woods. So I guess his wife didn't know that he was over at my aunt's house, which was right across the street.
Now these memories of her neighbor's father are all Aina can think about. So she decides to call Joanne, her childhood best friend, who she's realizing may actually be her half-sister.
And I said, hey, look, this is what I'm up to. Because I didn't know how she would react to it. But I said, I'm coming up with these last names. And I kept trying to pull things from the 23andMe that might ring a bell for her, or people that she might know, or other names that she might know. And it took some digging, and I kept sending her screenshots off of 23andMe. I'm like, do you recognize this person, or these names, or this, that? And then all of a sudden, it was really weird because all these people that I was suddenly linked to came from a little town in West Virginia, Sissonville. And I had sent her a screenshot with that on it for one of these people. And she said, wait a minute. She said, that's the town.
The small town where Joanne's father, Henry, originally comes from. So Joanne starts sending Aina old photos of Henry's family.
And that's where some aha moments came, because then I finally saw someone that I did look like, because I never looked like anybody in my family. Finally saw who I actually looked like, which would have been my uncle, my paternal uncle. Sent me a photo of him, and then I had a photo of myself as a child, and I put them side by side, and I'm like, oh my God, I look like Henry's brother. It still wasn't completely sinking in for Joanne, and I don't think it was completely sinking in for me.
Despite all the evidence mounting up before them, neither Aina nor Joanne are 100% convinced. When adults lie to children, decades of deception can speak much louder than even scientific evidence. So Aina orders a second DNA test, this time from Ancestry DNA, the company that has by far the most amount of users, meaning it has the greatest potential for DNA matches.
And then when I took the Ancestry test, then I got the complete aha moment. My sister that I was raised with is in the data bank, and she comes up as a half sibling. So there's that. And then a first cousin under the Smart side of the family, under Joanne's family, who is her first cousin, came up as my first cousin. There's one in particular who was in the Ancestry data bank on my father's side, did not come up as my first cousin like it did under my sister Jan. So Jan and I, my older sister and I, did not have the same family matches.
So you finally have undeniable confirmation now that your neighbor's father is your biological father. What do you do in that moment? When my mom had her DNA surprise, I remember her saying, "Get me a glass of wine." Is that what you do?
Probably should have, but I think I had a breakdown. I just wept. And I even thinking about it now, it's painful. It's sad. It's so hurtful that someone just could somebody have not even left me a note? It's so painful because I don't personally want to live in the rearview mirror, but I have put myself in the rearview mirror because I need to make sense of a lot of things so I can continue to move forward at this point. And so now I'm left piecing it together. It was just such a deep sadness and sorrow and hurt, belief and disbelief all at once. I think the disbelief was of how long it went on for and how many people were probably involved. I didn't even realize how many people probably knew.
And of course, Joanne's been waiting for you to get this second DNA result. So now you have to call your childhood neighbor and tell her that you're a lot more than just the girl next door.
I did call Joanne. She goes, "Oh my God, okay." And then I put all the pieces together. I said, "You realize that my son is the only living grandson of our biological father. And my son is your nephew." I said, "And my grandchildren are related to you. And those would have been Henry's great-grandchildren." I said, "We're all related." And then we kind of had to fast pace a sibling relationship on that, which I'm grateful she was all on board with. And now I have this new sister that I've literally known pretty much my entire life because she's only 10 months younger than me. Someone that I knew so well, that I had cared about and loved my entire life.
And how has your relationship changed since the DNA test?
Oh God, it really is great. I mean, it was good before. It's great now. It's better than great. It's more than I could have ever hoped for. We are so close. She has just been so wonderful, so good, so loving, so kind. There are just not enough good things to say. I just don't even have the vocabulary for it all. And it really just brings home the fact that connection, I don't have a connection like that with any other friend than I had with her. And now this really explains it. There is something to genetics and biology and the similarities that we share.
Aina has much more in common with Joanne than she ever imagined, but she no longer shares DNA with so much of the family she grew up with. She's had to start calling members of her dad's family to tell them about her mother's affair, reveal the discovery about her paternity, and break the news that she isn't actually related to her paternal aunts, uncles, and cousins, like her cousin Beth.
Oh, I put it together immediately, but the first words out of my mouth were, "Aina, you are my cousin. You will always be my cousin. I don't know any different. This doesn't change anything with you being my cousin." And I still feel that way. I mean, if she were an adopted baby, she'd still be my cousin. And I'm very jealous because she's got long legs and blonde hair and she's gorgeous. And now we all know why. She doesn't have our body makeup. And that's a big tease because, you know, we all talk about how short and squatty we are, and she's not.
None of Aina or Joanne's parents are alive to answer any questions. Looking back, though, Aina thinks the families did suspect that she was Henry's daughter. Asking questions of her relatives now, Aina believes everyone knew about her mother's affair. And ironically, Aina says it was her mom's side of the family that shunned her.
I didn't really feel it from my father's side of the family, but I did feel it from my mother's side of the family. And to the point of, it was venomous at times. It is inexplicable. I'd like to think that everything is forgivable, but it's really unforgivable to not treat a child nicely because they have nothing to do with their paternity. I really do think that these women, my mother, her two sisters, I think in an effort somehow to right the ship emotionally or psychologically for themselves, I was the path of least resistance to put all that whether it was anger or ill feelings. And it's like, my God, you don't take the actions of a grown woman who has a child and take it out on the child. What are you doing? Why? That's just wrong. But that's something that all four of them, my mother, my grandmother, her two sisters, that's something they all had to live with in their own behavior. That's their character. And I do my best every day not to make that part of my character.
For all the adults who treated Anna so badly as a little girl, one woman will always stand out for her kindness. Why do you think Joanne's mom was so good to you? When you talk about her, your face lights up, your voice changes. You have this warmth when you talk about her. And it's very surprising because you believe she knew about the affair and even suspected that you were her husband's daughter.
Well, I get emotional about it, sorry. I think of all the people who really, in my estimation, it really surprises me that her mother, I can't imagine what she went through. Because I can't, she's not alive to thank her for being so kind to me when she didn't have to be. And it is surprising how nice she was to me under these circumstances, which we know to be true. My heart is broken for her, as my heart breaks a little bit for everybody, even in this scenario. And how her mother dealt with that, because her mother, of course, had to know. Henry, he was at our house. He wasn't at their house. I was always just included, and she always made me feel included. Really, growing up across the street from Joanne was kind of like an endless vacation, so to speak, because that was where I felt the most safe. I never felt out of place, and I think that's probably the most honest I can be about it. I never felt out of place, where in my own home, I always felt uncomfortable. She was just nice. That was her character, and that's who she was.
You've added a relative.
Yes.
Your best friend from across the street is your half-sister, and the dad who raised you isn't your biological father. He's not a blood relative. So given all of this experience you've had now, and given that you've had time to let this settle in, what is the definition of family to you, Anna?
All this that I know now, family to me are the people who show up for you.
And Beth, your cousin, who you're not related to anymore, it sounds like you guys have showed up even more for each other since finding out that you're not related.
Oh, gosh. I am so blessed by having that relationship. She has shown up for me.
And your dad who raised you showed up for you.
He showed up for me. Absolutely. Showed up for me.
And Joanne has showed up for you.
Yeah, definitely. Beyond showed up for me.
Today, Anna's Facebook profile picture is a selfie of her and Joanne together. Written across the bottom of the photo in big writing is one simple word: sisters. On the next episode, a man from Alabama and a man from the Philippines make the DNA connection of a lifetime.
I got an email through Ancestry that said I was born in the Philippines, and I found out I was adopted a few years ago. And I thought, well, gosh, I'd love to help the guy.
I told my wife I had a DNA match, and she asked me, what are you going to do? I told her I don't know.
I got to where I couldn't sleep at night because I felt like I was holding information from my family, and we're close.
That's on the following edition of Suddenly Family, a production of CNN Philippines and Loomis Productions. Our editor is Lori Burke. Sound engineer, Levi Mercurio. This show is created, written, and hosted by me. I'm Samuel Burke.
I
have a responsibility as a journalist to tell the public what's going on.
Now more than ever, the role of the media and journalists is extremely important.
To make that first rough draft of history kung tawagin.
As journalists, we deliver the news, we give the right kind of information.
News really has the power to shape and influence a person's perspective of the world.
It's about the people, it's about the stories.
We verify, we confirm, we double check, we triple check from different sources.
To give them the truth. Trust in one word, I would believe, is integrity.
You can't force trust, you have to earn it.
People can't trust me if they know that I don't know what I'm talking about. It can be very challenging, but it's very, very fulfilling.
News you can trust.
News you can trust.
This is CNN Philippines. News you can trust.